Greetings to all of you, my dear students. Now, in our second session, we are going to discuss something about signal transduction and targets of drug action. So, in this, we'll be discussing something about signal transduction, targets of drug action, and non-receptor mediated drug action. So, let us see that. Signal transduction, what is it? The receptor, after recognizing its specific ligands, it binds with it and initiates biochemical reaction which transmit the signal from the ligand to proteins in the cell membrane and within the cell. These are the post-receptor events to produce a pharmacological response. And such events amplify the original signal by a cascade effect and regulate the function of the cell. So within the cell membrane, within the cell membrane and within the cell, producing cascade of events with signal amplification. Okay. So the receptor, its a cellular target, and the intermediate molecules which are known as otherwise transporters, if any, are designated as receptor effector system, otherwise known as signal transduction system. So you can see here in this diagram, so receptor, drug molecule or signal molecule is combining with it, and then it will traverse the cell membrane, enters into the cell. This is the signal transductory pathway, ultimately giving rise to the response or effect. Then what is constitutive activation? So I think we have discussed this in the earlier session. Biologically, the receptor is generally inactive till a ligand binds to it. Only then it gets activated and triggers the post-receptor events. An exception occurs when the receptor in a target endocrine gland undergoes a constitutive action even in the absence of agonist due to genetic mutation. It is purely due to genetic mutation. So because of which the target gland overproduces its hormones and there is a development of disease within the body. The example is overfunctioning of solitary thyroid nodule giving rise to Plummer's disease. So you can see here in this diagram. So this is agonist is there here, inverse agonist is there here. Here we can see only the receptor, there is no ligand here. This is constitutive activity of the receptor in the absence of agonist. Then classification of receptors. An important neurotransmitter may activate several receptor types. That is like histamine. We have 4 types of receptors. Dopamine and adrenaline have 5 receptors. And acetylcholine, 7 types of receptors. Histamine, H1, H2, H3, H4. Dopamine, D1 to D5. Adrenaline, we have alpha and beta receptors. Alpha 1, alpha 2, and beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. Acetylcholine, we have both muscarinic and nicotinic receptors. Nicotinic are NN and NM. Muscarinic means 1 to 5 types. Okay. Molecular cloning has further accelerated discovery of novel receptor subtypes, and their expression as recombinant proteins has facilitated discovery of subtypes selective drugs. So we have alpha beta, that is receptor classes. This is broad group. Again alpha 1, alpha 2, that is subtypes. Alpha 1A, 1B, 1C, they are designated as receptor isoforms. Then coming to the targets of drug action, this is the main theme of this topic, drug receptors. So this theme, the targets of drug action, is connected to each and every chapter of pharmacology. So please pay attention to it. If you can't understand it, then you can't understand the rest of the pharmacology. Paul Ehrlich suggested that drug action is due to chemical interaction between drugs and tissues. We have studied that. Drug molecules must combine with one or more constituents of the cell and produce chemical influence to produce a pharmacological response. So most of the drugs produce their effects by binding with protein molecules, and we have such 4 regulatory proteins which are divided like one is receptors, number 2 ion channels, number 3 enzymes, and number 4 carrier molecules or membrane transporters. So we'll discuss one by one now. So this is targets for drug binding, receptors, ion channels, enzymes, and transporters. First, we'll get into the receptors proper. This is one of the most important mechanisms of drug action, and several drugs act through receptors. Receptors can be defined as macromolecules, mainly proteinaceous in nature, to which endogenous or exogenous substances combine and produce response. This we know already. To mediate the response, a receptor has two sites, that is the ligand binding site, that is signaling or message propagation. Signal reception will be there. And the effector site, which is present within the cell, resulting into an effect of therapeutic response. So ligand binding site and effector site. So drug receptor interaction leads to a chain of events through intracellular mediators or secondary messengers. In between, we have second messengers. So receptors are also linked with ion channels and enzymes. The common second messengers are cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, DAG, IP3, and calcium. What is this IP3 DAG? We'll discuss in the subsequent slides. So types of receptors. We know the basics of receptors and what is receptor and what are the theories of receptors and what are the various mechanisms of pharmacodynamics. Now we get into the types of receptors. Based on molecular structure and type of transduction mechanism, there are 4 types of receptors. Type 1 is ion channel link or otherwise known as ionotropic receptors. Type 2, GPCR, otherwise known as G protein coupled receptors or metabotropic receptors. Type 3, protein kinase linked receptors. And type 4 receptors that regulate DNA or gene transcription. So now we'll discuss something about each and every type of receptor and their signal transduction mechanisms. So this is overall together all 4 types of receptors: ligand gated, ion channels, metabotropic, kinase link, and nuclear receptors. So I'll show this at the end of the session so you'll get the clarity. Ionotropic receptors, number 1. So they have oligomeric proteins that contain about 20 transmembrane segments. So postgraduate students must be knowing that metabotropic receptors have 7 transmembrane segments. Here we have 20 transmembrane segments which surround the central aqueous channel. This is the aqueous channel around which the transmembrane segments will be there. They are membrane or cell surface receptors. So they're present within the cell membrane. Linked to ion channels. That receptor itself is linked to ion channel. Example, nicotinic acetylcholine receptor linked with sodium channel and GABA A receptor linked with chloride channel. Ionotropic receptors, they are also known as ligand gated ion channels because they are connected to the ion channels and they regulate those ion channels. That means they open only when an agonist occupies the receptor. So the binding of agonist to the receptor site, ligand binding site, directly opens the channel, leading to either depolarization or hyperpolarization or change in cytosolic concentration, that is especially calcium concentration. All these pathways are useful in the signal transduction. Signal transduction means signal passing from external to inside of the cell, giving rise to the response or effect. The agonist directly operates ion channels, so there is no involvement of second messengers. So it is a fast acting type of receptor which the action is elicited within milliseconds. The time elapsed between the binding of the agonist to a ligand-gated channel and the cellular response can be measured only in milliseconds. So because of this fast acting nature, so this kind of signal transduction mechanism is important for moment to moment transfer of information across the synapses within the body. Okay. Then ligand-gated ion channels can be regulated by phosphorylation and endocytosis. So in the CNS, these mechanisms contribute to synaptic plasticity involved in learning and memory. This point is very, very important for postgraduate students. Then coming to the structure, the receptor is usually a pentameric protein. All subunits in addition to large intra and extracellular segments generally have 4 membrane spanning helical domains. Okay, so the subunits are mostly arranged. So now I will just read out, and if there is any discussion needed, I'll discuss. Then I'll show the diagrams and then we'll again rediscuss. Then you will have the clarity. I've kept many diagrams to have a clear picture about it. So the subunits are mostly arranged round the channel subunits round the channel like a rosette. That means rose flower kind of rose flower petals. How they are arranged? Like that. Subunits are arranged around the channel. And alpha subunits usually bear the agonist binding sites, not the other sites. What are the other subunits? We'll see. So when acetylcholine binds to sites on the alpha subunit, a conformational change occurs that results in the transient opening of the aqueous channel. This is aqueous channel. This is closed otherwise. So when the ligand binds to the receptor site at alpha subunit, this channel is open, through which sodium ions penetrate from the extracellular fluid to cause electrical depolarization of the cell, giving rise to the effect. So you can see here in the diagram, this is nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. So you can see this is a rosette formation. 5 subunits are there, 2 alpha, beta, 1 gamma, and then 1 delta, and then 1 gamma. You can't see the gamma here because it is a cross section. So this is closed form. Here it is closed. Channel is closed. So this is alpha subunit to this, the ligand binding on this, the ligand binding site is located. So the ligand will come, this here it is acetylcholine molecule will come and bind to the ligand binding site that is present on the alpha subunit of the receptor. Then the ion channel opens, there is a passage of sodium ions into the cell causing depolarization of the cell, then producing its effect. So you can see the same thing here. 2 alpha subunits, acetylcholine comes and binds. So sodium channel, sodium ions influx. So along with that, there is cascade of events which will result in calcium release, so that you will know later, producing in muscle contraction with nicotinic receptors of acetylcholine, not the muscarinic receptors. Then allosteric modifiers. Certain receptor-operated or ligand-gated ion channels also have secondary ligands which bind to an allosteric site. Agonist binds at one site, whereas another secondary ligand binds to another site, which is otherwise known as the allosteric site, and modulates the gating of the channel by the primary ligand. It influences the primary ligand and modulates the channel opening and closing. Okay. Example, benzodiazepines increase chloride conductance through GABA A receptor linked with chloride ion channel. So all these things will come under, whenever you discuss about the benzodiazepines, the same mechanisms you'll be reading there. So you will have clear-cut picture what is happening with the drug administration. Then ligand-gated ion channels and voltage-gated ion channels. There are 2 types of channels. Here we will be discussing only about ligand-gated ion channels. So that is receptor-operated channels. So these channels open only when agonist or a drug or neurotransmitter molecule endogenously bind with ligand binding site. Example is nicotinic receptor. Whereas in voltage-gated ion channels, the channels open by changes in the transmembrane potential. The voltage is little bit differing externally and internally to the cell membrane. Because of the variation, the ion channel opens. Okay. Example, local anesthetics which obstruct voltage sensitive sodium channels. So these are the various types of voltage gated ion channels. You can see here sodium, calcium, potassium, and chloride. So this is ligand gated ion channel. You can see ion influx when the ion channel opens by the ligand binding. Same thing here, neurotransmitter combining. This is closed. After the drug receptor complex formation, here complex is formed, channel is open, ion inflow is there. So depends on which drug is acting on which receptor, so which ion channel is open and what is the transfer of ion moments, whether inside or outside. You can see this is the electron microscopic picture. You can see the rosette formation here from above. 2 alpha, 1 beta, 1 gamma, 1 delta. This is the pore. This channel is open. Sodium influx happens here. Voltage gated ion channels. Here you can see the same thing. Channel is in inactivated form. When there is a difference of the voltage, then the channel gets open. So ions traverse through the channel and then again See, this is open. This is open. This is ants travel through the channel, and then again it is closing. This is in inactivated state. Okay. The same thing here. You can see this is closed state at resting potential. This is closed. Okay. Open phase and channel influx, and again inactivated state. It's closing. So ion channel receptors examples are nicotinicolergic receptor, glutamate receptor, GABA A, and glycine. Glutamate is excitatory neurotransmitter, and then GABA and glycine are inhibitory neurotransmitters in the brain. So agonist opens the channel. You're aware of agonist, antagonist, and inverse agonist that we have discussed in the earlier session. Now we'll be bringing the application of those pharmacodynamic principle here. So agonist opens the channel. Antagonist prevents the agonist from opening the channel because it does not have its own effect. And inverse agonist closes the open channel. So here you can see GABA and glycine. This is inhibitory neurotransmitter. So chloride channel inflow, and then nicotinic receptor and excitatory transmitter glutamate receptor, sodium influx will be there along with calcium influx. Then ion channel modulators. This is very, very important for postgraduates. So modulate means some channels get stimulated, some channels get depressed, some channels get giving rise to stimulatory action or inhibitory action. It depends on. Quinidine blocks myocardial sodium channels. Nifedipine blocks L-type of voltage sensitive calcium channel. Nicorandil opens ATP sensitive potassium channel. Sulfonylurea hypoglycemics inhibit pancreatic ATP sensitive potassium channels. Phenytoin modulates or prolongs the inactivated state of voltage sensitive neuronal sodium channel. So this is about ionotropic receptors. So 4 types of receptors we have. One we have finished. The second one, metabotropic receptors. So these are otherwise known as G protein coupled receptors. These are also present in the cell membrane, but they are not connected to the ion channels, unlike that of in ionotropic receptors. Here they are coupled to the effector system or enzyme channel through G proteins. That's why they are referred to as G protein coupled receptors. So sites are they're present in all the cells, abundant in brain and gut. So G protein means what sort of G protein is linked to the receptor? G protein in the form of GDP or GTP, that is guanosine diphosphate or triphosphate. Examples are muscarinic cholinergic receptors. There, which type of cholinergic receptors? Ionotropic receptors are nicotinic. Here, muscarinic. And then adrenergic beta 1 and alpha 2 receptors, dopamine and 5-HT receptors, opiate and purine receptors, and neuromodulators in brain. These are the few examples. At least you can remember 1 or 2 examples. Then nearly 65% of prescription drugs are targeted against GPCR. This is the most common pathway that many of the drugs go through. So this is the structure. GPCR composed of 7 transmembrane helices, which have an extracellular domain as drug or neurotransmitter binding site. Here the drug or neurotransmitter comes and binds. And an intracellular domain, this is one, that couples with intracellular effector system through G protein. So this is G protein. Intracellular effector system is bind to this. Okay. So GPCRs make up the largest receptor family and are also called 7-membrane or serpentine receptors because the receptor polypeptide chains snakes across the plasma membrane 7 times. This is snaking. 7 times. Okay. The G proteins float in the membrane with their exposed domain lying in the cytosol and are heterotrimeric in composition. Heterotrimeric means all the 3 subunits are of different type, alpha, beta, gamma, which are tightly bound together. You can see here, alpha, beta, gamma. This is heterotrimeric subunits of the G protein receptors, and this is in connection, it is connected to the effector system in the cell. So we have 3 types of G protein coupled receptor families. This is only for postgraduate students. Family A, rhodopsin family, it is the largest group and receptors for most amine neurotransmitters, many neuropeptides, urines, prostanoids, cannabinoids belong to this family. And the structure is short extracellular or N-terminal tail. Ligand binds to transmembrane helices or to extracellular loops. Then B family, otherwise known as secretin or glucagon receptor family. Examples are receptors for peptide hormones, including secretin, glucagon, calcitonin, etc. And the structure is intermediate extracellular tail incorporating ligand binding domain. And C family, otherwise known as metabotropic glutamate receptor or calcium sensor family. It is a very small group, unlike that of the A group, and it is metabotropic glutamate receptors, GABA B, and calcium sensing receptors. And the structure is long extracellular tail incorporating ligand binding domain. You can see the difference here. A is largest group, C is smallest. A has short extracellular tail and C has long extracellular tail. So G protein has alpha, beta, gamma subunits. So we have other variants of G alpha proteins again. G stimulatory, GS, G inhibitory, GI, and GQ connected to the phospholipase activity. So GS and GI, they produce stimulation or inhibition of adenylyl cyclase enzyme within the cell, whereas GQ controls phospholipase activity. So we have three subunits, don't get confused. Alpha beta subunit, and G alpha proteins are again divided into three types, GS, GI, and GQ. So the differences between these three are GS stimulates membrane-bound adenylate cyclase, resulting in the effector pathway will be increased adenylyl cyclase activity, so increased cycling KMP concentration, and then increased calcium flow. GI inhibits membrane-bound adenylate cyclase, so decreased adenylyl cyclase activity, decreased cyclic KMP production, and increased potassium flow. Whereas GQ, it activates phospholipase C, that is different. So it activates phospholipase C. So there is increased production of IP3 and DAG and calcium entry also. Okay. So here we have examples of GS stimulatory or beta adrenoceptors, histamine receptors, serotonin receptors, and D1. D2 belong to GI receptors, and then alpha 2 receptors, N2 receptors, and opioid receptors. And here alpha 1 receptors. So alpha 1 GQ and alpha 2 is GI. So all these things will come under autonomic nervous system, again types of receptors and which receptor is acting through GS or GI, GQ. Everything is important there. Then GQ, alpha 1 adrenoceptors, muscarinic M1 receptors, and angiotensin 1 receptor. Then what is agonist pleiotropy? Again important for postgraduate students. A limited number of G proteins are shared between different receptors, and one receptor can utilize more than one G protein, that is agonist pleiotropy. So this is one receptor like prostanoid receptor sharing many types of G proteins, GS, GI, GQ. Again, M2, D2, alpha 2 adrenergic receptors and GABA B, 5-HT1 are sharing GI and GO. Whereas M1, M3, alpha 1 and 5-HT2 receptors are sharing GQ only, and beta adrenergic receptors only GS. So it is like if one receptor sharing more than one G protein, that is agonist pleiotropy. GPCR mechanism. Let us see the actual mechanism of this particular receptor. In the resting or inactive state, we have seen that G protein has three subunits. So alpha, beta, gamma subunit of G protein is linked with one another. So all three together they unite, and GDP is bound to alpha subunit at the exposed domain. So exposed domain is present in the cell intracellularly. So that molecule, that end exposed domain of the GPCR, it has GDP, which is connected to alpha, beta, gamma together, but specifically it is binding to the alpha subunit. So extracellular domain will be there, which will give the receptor site to the agonist or ligand molecule. So agonist will combine with that extracellular domain of the GPCR. For example, here we are taking beta 1 adrenoceptor. So that causes the exchange of GTP for GDP on the alpha subunit. So here intracellularly, as soon as the agonist combines with the extracellular domain, that is the receptor site, the GDP which is combining with the alpha beta gamma subunit, that will be replaced with GTP. So GDP will go away and GTP will come and combine with alpha beta gamma subunit. The activated alpha subunit, so it is in activated form now, carrying GTP, dissociates from the other two subunits which now interact with the target protein adenylyl cyclase and activating. So now GTP is in union with alpha, beta, gamma. So alpha will stay back with GTP because it is going to initiate cascade of events, and then beta gamma will dissociate from GTP alpha complex, and then it will stimulate the adenylyl cyclase, which is the target protein. So for cyclic AMP, the effector enzyme is adenylyl cyclase. This is the effector. You have to remember that, which is the ligand, which is the effector. So a membrane protein that converts intracellular adenosine triphosphate, that is ATP, to cyclic AMP, that is converted by the enzyme, that is the effector molecule adenylyl cyclase. So it acts like this cyclic AMP, which is liberated, that acts like a second messenger. This second messenger is absent in inotropic receptors but present in GPCR family. So the activated effector then propagates transduction mechanism through second messenger, that is cyclic AMP, to produce effects. The first messenger is agonist itself, transduction mechanism. So stimulation of these receptors provides responses that last for seconds or minutes. There in inotropic receptors, it is milliseconds. Here seconds or minutes. So what happens to this beta gamma dimer, which is getting separated from the activated molecule of GPCR along with alpha subunit? So does it have any action? So it has been shown that it is shown to activate receptor operated potassium channels, to inhibit voltage gated calcium channels, and promote GPCR desensitization at higher rates of activation. So receptor, after getting stimulated for a period of time of action, it has to be terminated for its action. So that responsibility is taken by beta gamma dimer that gets dissociated, and the process through which this termination of action happens is through desensitization. So GTPase activity is present in alpha subunit. We know that. Then activation of the effector is terminated on hydrolysis of GTP molecule, and alpha subunit recombines with beta gamma subunits, and the effector protein adenylate cyclase is deactivated. So beta gamma dimer, that we know what is its action, termination of action of the receptor through desensitization. So we have the alpha subunit combining with the GTP molecule. So this GTPase activity is present in alpha subunit itself. So after the receptor acts for a time period, then that alpha subunit releases GTPase activity. So it hydrolyzes the GTP molecule and then leaves the GTP molecule and then goes back and combines with its friends, that is beta gamma subunits. And then because of that, effector protein, that is adenylate cyclase, is deactivated because the alpha is going back. So you can see the entire mechanism here. Receptor in inactive state. So this is what? Alpha, beta, gamma combined with GDP. Then here, this is receptor occupied by agonist. So GDP is replaced by GTP. So that combines with alpha. And soon beta, gamma gets separated. So it is useful for desensitization program or termination of action of the receptor. Then this alpha GTP targets or stimulates the target proteins. So cyclic AMP mediated actions, the effector system or the second messenger. Then effector system is like cyclic AMP, that is the second messenger, and adenylate cyclase acts as the effector system. Then this alpha hydrolyzes GTP molecule and then goes back to beta. So this is GTP is hydrolyzed. So receptor target, this is active receptor, is going to become inactive as soon as the hydrolysis of GTP happens. And alpha subunit goes back and combines with beta gamma subunits. And GTP, soon it gets hydrolyzed. So this will be releasing this molecule. Same here. G protein, GTP, cyclic AMP is released through adenylate cyclase stimulation. This acts like a second messenger, which results in protein kinase stimulation. So further phosphorylation of proteins within the body happen, giving rise to cellular responses. Here you can see a little bit more clear of the cascade of events. Don't think that it is a similar kind of picture. I'm going into the details step by step. So alpha, beta, gamma subunit, GDP, then GTP is replacing GTP. So alpha subunit is there. So hormone receptor complex causes GDP to bond. And that activated form separates from beta gamma subunits and moves to adenylate cyclase, which converts ATP to cyclic AMP. Then this cyclic AMP further activates phosphorylate kinase activity. So because of which phosphorylation of cellular proteins and further cascade of events will result. And this cyclic AMP, this is second messenger activity, is also terminated by phosphodiesterase enzymes. Okay, so because of the phosphodiesterase enzyme activity, cyclic AMP, the second messenger is metabolized, and because of which the reversing the activation of the PKA system will be there. Then again, same thing, GTP is going to combine with this adenylate cyclase. So activation of the adenylate cyclase, conversion into cyclic AMP, inactive protein kinase to active protein kinase. PKA means protein kinase. So it triggers responses of target cell, that is activates enzymes, stimulates cellular secretion, opens ion channel, etc. So hope this is clear for you regarding the metabotropic receptors mechanism of action. We need to draw a diagram and then expand in the final exam. Then effector systems of this GPCR. So there are 4 G protein coupled effector systems. So you know the meaning of effector system that represent within the cell. So through which G proteins mediate their cellular actions or signal transduction mechanism. So number 1 is adenylate cyclase, that is cyclic AMP system that we have discussed a little bit here. Then phospholipase C inositol phosphate system or IP3DAG pathway. And third one is ion channel regulation. And fourth one is guanylate cyclase cyclic GMP system. Let us see one by one. Adenylate cyclase or cyclic AMP system. So here, increased cyclic AMP production in response to beta adrenergic activation by stimulatory G receptors affects the glycogen and fat metabolism in liver muscles. So it affects it. So hence what happens, stored energy in the form of glycogen or fat it is catabolized and excess amount of glucose is available for the muscle contraction process. So the cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase activity also increases the activity of calcium channels. That's what we discussed in the earlier slides in the heart muscle specifically. Phosphorylation of these channels increase the calcium entry into the cell during the action potential, thereby increasing the force of contraction of the heart muscle. We'll see in the diagram now. So here adenylate cyclase, cyclic AMP is released from ATP. So this is going to get metabolized at the end by phosphodiesterase enzyme. And here's protein kinase. This is cyclic AMP is going to activate the protein kinase which is inactive. So further there is increased lipolysis, decreased glycogen synthesis and increased glycogen breakdown to glucose. So much amount of glucose is used for the muscular contraction. So enhanced force of contraction. So along with calcium release, increased force of contraction of heart muscle results. Inhibition of adenylate cyclase mediated by GI leads to decreased cyclic AMP production. Examples are which are inhibitory receptors, M2 receptors of cardiac muscle, alpha 2 adenoreceptors of smooth muscles, opioid and D2 receptors. And the action of cyclic AMP is terminated intracellularly by phosphodiesterase enzyme, which again hydrolyzes it to 5-AMP. So you can see this is excitatory pathway, epinephrine, glucagon, ACTH, and inhibitory pathway, PGE1 and adenosine. So receptor combines here with the, ligand combines here with the receptor, activation of enzyme system, adenylate cyclase, inhibition of adenylate cyclase, Stimulation of G proteins, inhibition of G proteins. So increased production of cyclic AMP here, and then further cascade of events. And here the a decreased production of cyclic AMP and further cascade of events result. Acting as intracellular second messenger, cyclic AMP mediates responses such as, this is important for postgraduate students only. Conservation of water by kidney, mediated by vasopressin, calcium homeostasis, that is regulated by parathyroid hormone. We need to recollect back. Increased rate and force of contraction of heart muscle, which is seen with beta adenomimetic catecholamines. Production of adrenal and sex steroids in response to corticotropin or FSH. Relaxation of smooth muscle. Many other endocrine and neural processes. So you can see here in this diagram, I'm not going to describe in detail. You can just go through the diagram. All muscarinic receptors inhibitory, whether it is through GI or GQ. So phospholipase C activity, it is G if it is GQ. And GI means cyclic AMP decrease. Okay. So here elevated calcium and then decreased calcium influx and increased potassium effects. Elevated calcium, this means the system that is involved here, it is here salivary gland and stomach secretion. So same thing, you can see the other things. And here also GQ, GI, GS. The main pathways, phospholipase C and then cyclic AMP increased and decreased activity depending on the system that is involved. Then IP3-DAG system. Cyclic AMP is one. Second one is IP3-DAG system. Some drugs bind to receptors linked to GQ proteins. So we have seen GS, GI, and GQ. And activate the membrane enzyme phospholipase C. That's what we have seen in the earlier slide. So whenever GI proteins, GS proteins, they are connected to adenylate cyclase, whereas GQ proteins, they are connected to phospholipase C enzyme. So stimulation of phospholipase C leads to hydrolysis of phosphatidyl inositol 4,5-diphosphate, that is PIP2, which is a phospholipid component of the plasma membrane. So that gets hydrolyzed and gets split into two molecules, that is diacylglycerol or inositol triphosphate. So PIP2 hydrolysis to DAG and IP3. So DAG remains confined to the membrane, cell membrane, whereas IP3 being water soluble diffuses through the cytosol, where it triggers the release of calcium from storage vesicles of the endoplasmic reticulum. So let us see that. The raised cytosolic concentration of calcium, because it is released from the vesicular stores, promotes the binding of calcium to calmodulin. So this calcium will go and combine with calmodulin, a calcium binding protein, which regulates the activities of various enzymes, resulting in responses like contraction, secretion, and enzyme activation, etc. So this is about IP3. So DAG stays back within the cell membrane itself. It activates a phospholipid and the calcium sensitive protein kinase C. Okay, which then phosphorylates specific protein substrates, leading to the response. Example, release of hormones, increase or decrease in neurotransmitter release, and inflammatory response. Then, as in the cyclic AMP system, multiple mechanisms exist to terminate. So how this has to be terminated? So there we know inotropic receptors, hydrolysis of the molecule, termination, phosphodiesterases. So here, the terminating signaling by phosphoinositide pathway, IP3 is inactivated because it is active molecule. It has to be inactivated first by dephosphorylation to inositol and then to phosphatidyl inositol monophosphate, which is reutilized in the synthesis of PIP2, which is present in the cell membrane. So it goes back to the main reaction. So DAG on the other hand is either phosphorylated to phosphatidic acid and finally converted back to phospholipids, or deacetylated to arachidonic acid, a precursor of prostaglandins. So IP3 inactivation by dephosphorylation, DAG inactivation by one is phosphorylation and another is deacetylation to arachidonic acid, and it goes back to the cell membrane again. And what about the excess amount of calcium that is released from the storage vesicles of the endoplasmic reticulum? So that is removed from the cytosol by calcium pump through active transport. It cleans up the excess calcium. So that's how the termination of the actionable result. So you can see that here. So G protein, so GTP, Phospholipase C is activated here, in this pathway. So PIP2 is broken down to DAG and IP3. DAG, protein kinase C activity. So phosphorylation of the protein molecules and response resulting. So IP3 goes back to the endoplasmic reticulum and then brings out or makes the release of excessive amount of calcium, which binds with calmodulin, which again phosphorylates through protein kinase. So phosphorylation giving rise to effects like contraction, metabolism, secretion, transport, etc., etc. So cyclic AMP, and this is GMP pathway, G transport pathway, and then ion channel regulation. Cyclic AMP pathway and IP3-DAG pathway and ion channel regulation. So ion channel regulation means here the GPCR can directly control ion channels without any coupling protein or secondary messenger, like cyclic AMP is not needed or IP3 is also not needed, which generally act as second messengers. Like that in cyclic AMP pathway, cyclic AMP will be acting as second messenger. In IP3-DAG pathway, IP3 will be acting as second messenger. In ion channel regulation, no such second messenger involvement will be there. So G proteins on activation may either open or close specific ion channels like sodium, calcium, potassium, etc., leading to either depolarization or hyperpolarization in change in cytosolic cation concentration, resulting into membrane excitability, contractility, and further neurotransmitter release. So direct channel regulation is mostly the function of the beta gamma dimer of the dissociated G protein. Alpha subunit is useful in signal transduction, and beta gamma subunit for desensitization or the termination of action, or even direct channel regulation. This is very, very important point. So GS opens calcium channels in myocardium, so resulting in inotropy and chronotropy. GI and GO open potassium channels in heart and smooth muscles, inhibiting neuronal calcium channels. In cardiac muscles, specifically M2 receptors, which are inhibitory in nature, they enhance potassium permeability and thus hyperpolarizing the cells, inhibiting electrical activity. And ulta is the case with beta adrenergic receptors. And in neurons, similar is the case with opening of potassium channels or closure of calcium channels by opioid analgesics like morphine. They decrease neuronal excitability to produce analgesic response. So here, there is direct interaction between GO, that is the beta gamma subunit, and the ion channel, direct ion channel regulation. So there is no involvement of the second messenger. So here you can see. So there is no second messenger involvement like IP3 or even cyclic AMP. So this subunit is directly stimulating the ion channel. So ions move in or out of the cell, resulting in particular response. Same is the case. So here beta gamma. So this is the main action of the beta gamma. So potassium channel flow giving rise into hyperpolarization of the cell. Then cyclic GMP system. Cyclic AMP, IP3-DAG system, and then ion channel regulation, then cyclic GMP system. So here cyclic GMP instead of cyclic AMP serves as intracellular second messenger in tissues like vascular smooth muscle producing relaxation, intestinal mucosal cell producing inhibition of salt and water absorption, as well as anion secretion, and in kidneys it produces natriuresis excretion. So GPCRs also activate guanylate cyclase, which converts, there it is like cyclic AMP is released, here cyclic GMP is released from GTP, there it is from ATP. So this cyclic GMP stimulates cyclic GMP dependent protein kinase, same thing again. It causes dilatation of vascular smooth muscle by dephosphorylation of myosin light chains. So the actions of cyclic GMP in these cells are terminated by enzymatic degradation of the cyclic nucleotide and dephosphorylation of kinase substrate. Because the cascade of events, positive responses are because of phosphorylation, so dephosphorylation of kinase substrates. So here you can see cyclic GMP is formed from GTP, then PKG pathway. So here, because of which proteins getting phosphorylated, lowering levels of calcium. So because of which we get relaxating effects on the vascular smooth muscle. So here you can see adenylate cyclase pathway. Phospholipase C means IP3-DAG pathway, then guanylate cyclase pathway. So cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, here IP3 and DAG. So all will be stimulating like here PKC, PKA and PKG. Everything is phosphorylation only. Okay, all these are belonging to the family of protein kinases. Protein kinase G, protein kinase A, protein kinase C. Okay, so cascade of events results, whether it is stimulatory or inhibitory. So the difference between inotropic and metabotropic receptors altogether are, this is like inotropic binding site plus channel combined. Here binding site is not associated with channel, but it can stimulate the ion channels also without even the involvement of second messenger. Mostly the reactions happen with the involvement of second messenger. Here second messenger independent, here second messenger involvement is there in most of the cases. Short latency action, longer latency, stays for long period of time. And it is very, this response is elicited within a short period of time, that is in milliseconds. Here slow response, that is like milliseconds to minutes. Postsynaptic and then pre and postsynaptic responses you can see in these receptors. So metabotropic receptors, this is how it is situated in the cell membrane. This is also situated in the cell membrane, inotropic receptor. Okay, so ligand gated ion channels or inotropic receptors or G protein coupled receptors. Ligand binding, channel opens, ion flux. Ligand binding, alpha stimulation, GTP, and then intracellular messengers like cyclic KMP or IP3 or cyclic GMP will be released, which act as intracellular second messengers. So phosphorylation of the proteins. And also here you can see the ion channel flow because of the direct link with the ion channels through beta and gamma dimer. Okay, so this is the main difference. Then, so we have finished inotropic receptors, metabotropic receptors. So now we have only two more receptors. Third one is tyrosine kinase linked receptors and fourth one is nuclear receptors. So we'll get into tyrosine kinase linked receptors. So these are either directly linked to tyrosine kinase or guanylate cyclase. So don't get confused with various types of receptors. You need to go through at least minimum 3 times. You need to study back and forth. Otherwise, you can't understand receptor topic. And if you can't understand the basic mechanisms of receptor mediated actions, you can't understand the other systemic pharmacology. So one directly linked to tyrosine kinase, that is receptors for insulin and various growth factors. Linked to guanylate cyclase, example, uritic peptide. So responses are mediating the action of variety of growth factors and peptide mediators. Agonist binding to the extracellular domain of these receptors produces the conformational change that results in dimerization. Dimerization means, don't think that the molecule is split into two. No, two molecules are combined together. That is called as dimerization, which is followed by autophosphorylation of the tyrosine residues. They themselves get phosphorylated soon after the agonist binding to the receptor. This happens in the intracellular tyrosine binding domain. So this tyrosine binding domain, intracellular portion will be there, that will get autophosphorylated. These phosphorylated tyrosine residues then couple with sulfhydryl domain of GRP2 protein, which results in a series of events culminating in the responses like various growth factors, peptide mediators, mitogenesis, etc., etc. So here you can see, so receptor comes and combines here. This is the inactive state. There is no receptor. Active state receptor combining with the receptor or ligand binding site. So this is like two molecules are separated. So dimerization. Two molecules are brought together. So ATP releasing the energy, and these inactive proteins get phosphorylated, and then this tyrosine binding residues of the receptor, they themselves get autophosphorylated, giving rise to cellular response. You can see ligand binding, dimerization, this is inactive state, then autophosphorylation, cellular response, and again the termination of action, unphosphorylation. This phosphorus is removed. So ADP is converted into, it is taken up, and again this conversion will go into the further cascades of events. This phosphorus will be utilized. So this is dephosphorylated tyrosine molecules. then this dephosphorylated molecule or unphosphorylated molecule will go back to the inactive state. That is the termination of action. Another picture, dimerization after ligand binding, and then tyrosine molecule autophosphorylation combining with sulfhydryl moiety of GRB2 gene, then phosphorylation of GRB2 gene. So that will combine with the phosphorylation residue and gets phosphorylated also. Then you don't need to remember all these things. So cascade of phosphorylation reactions result in the gene transcription finally. This is kinase cascade. So for every receptor, the ultimate effect is phosphorylation and then cellular response. That much you can remember. Then atrial natriuretic peptide, which is connected to cyclic GMP. Activation of these receptors due to agonist causes formation of cyclic GMP that in turn causes activation of cyclic GMP dependent protein kinase. So here you can see cyclic GMP is not involved here. So there, for receptors which are connected to atrial natriuretic peptide, cyclic GMP dependent protein kinase involvement is there. So there the other receptors, tyrosine kinase receptors will be involved without cyclic GMP involvement. Peptide ligands, growth hormone, erythropoietin, several kinds of interferon and other regulators of growth and differentiation, all these get involved. Like they come under the group of cytokine receptors. What is this tyrosine kinase receptors and cytokine receptors? There is a little bit variation between these two. What happens here, the protein tyrosine kinase activity is not intrinsic to the receptor molecule. Apart from that, in its space, a separate, not in its space, apart from that, a separate protein tyrosine kinase from the Janus kinase family, which is otherwise known as like a JOC protein, binds non-covalently to the receptor. So cytokine receptor will be there, same like the structure. JAK protein also will come and combine with there. Cytokine receptors dimerase after they bind the active ligand, say, allowing the bound JAKs to become activated and to phosphorylate tyrosine residues on the receptor. So there, in the tyrosine kinase receptors, it is autophosphorylation. Soon the ligand binds to the receptor. Here, soon the ligand binds to the receptors, JAK proteins will come and bind with the tyrosine molecules or residues, and they themselves, JAK proteins will get stimulated, which will phosphorylate tyrosine residue on the receptor. So phosphorylated tyrosine residues on the receptor's cytoplasmic surface then set in motion a complex signaling dance by binding another set of proteins called STATs, otherwise known as signal transducers and activators of transcription. So JAK stimulation, phosphorylation of tyrosine residues, and after that, another group of proteins called STATs, signal transducers and activators, they will come and bind with the receptors. So these bound STATs, they will also then again get phosphorylated by JAKs. So JAK will phosphorylate, tyrosine kinase moiety, and then STATs also. So two STAT molecules, they again dimerase, unite together, attaching one another's tyrosine phosphates, and finally the STAT dimer dissociates from the receptor and travels to the nucleus, where it starts the cascade of transcription of genes. So this STAT dimer also dissociates from the receptor and gets involved in the gene transcription. So JAK STAT kinase binding receptors do not have intrinsic enzyme or catalytic activity. But the initiating factor here is the dimerization due to agonist. So soon the agonist binds, dimerization happens. That is the main stimulus here, which causes the conformational change within the receptor and increases affinity for protein JAK kinase. So dimerization results in JAK binding. And again, STAT binding. STAT is also getting phosphorylated, dimerized, and then traverses through nucleus and then starts the cascade of events of gene transcription. So the JAK is activated after binding and causes phosphorylation of tyrosine residue and then binds with STAT and then phosphorylates STAT also. Phosphorylated STAT is translocated to nucleus after dimerization and regulates gene transcription that ultimately leads to biological effect. Examples of cytokine receptors are growth hormone, many cytokines, and interferons. So remember the difference between tyrosine kinase receptors and JAK STAT or cytokine receptors. So here you can see ligand cytokine is binding here. Soon there is like dimerization of the, what is, we can say, tyrosine residues. Here it is not given in this picture clearly. So JAK molecules also get bind to the receptor here. They get stimulated, and dimerization of the STAT molecule will get activated, and dimerization of STAT molecule, they get released from the receptor and then enter into the nucleus for further cascade of transcription reactions. So kinase linked receptors, tyrosine kinases plus hormone, autophosphorylation, and then phosphorylation of proteins, insulin, epidermal growth factor receptors, etc. JAK-STAT proteins here, JAK activation, phosphorylation of tyrosine residue, and then bind signal transducer and activator of transcription, STAT activation, phosphorylation by JAK, dimerization of STAT, and translocation to the nucleus, and gene transcription. Why I'm giving so many similar kind of diagrams means so that it will reinforce your memory. So here you can see the difference. Tyrosine kinase receptors. So dimerization, autophosphorylation, and then combining with GRP2 sulfhydryl moiety, and then it is going to cascade of phosphorylated reactions and gene transcription. Here JAK combining, dimerization of tyrosine receptors, and then STAT molecules dimerization, and then phosphorylation here, autophosphorylation I can say, not autophosphorylation, phosphorylation by JAK, and then here STAT molecules dimerization, and then separation from the moiety, then travels to the nucleus and gene transcription. Then the last one, that is cytosolic receptors. Examples: receptors for steroid hormones, sex hormones, thyroid hormones, vitamin D, etc. Their receptors are located in the cytosol. That's why otherwise known as cytosolic receptors in an active state complexed with heat shock proteins, HSP90 and some other proteins. In the absence of the hormone, the receptor is bound to HSP90, a protein that prevents normal folding of several structure domains of the receptor. So it will be like in a dormant stage in the absence of the hormone or agonist. As soon as the hormone binds to the receptor, that is the ligand binding domain, it triggers the release of immediately the heat shock protein 90 will be released from the receptor moiety. So examples we'll take glucocorticoids. They have a very high affinity to this receptor. When they cross the cell membrane, the glucocorticoid receptor dissociates. So glucocorticoid is the drug which is exogenously administered. So don't get confused here. And internally, in the cytosol, you see glucocorticoid receptor, which is combined with heat shock proteins. Those heat shock protein will move away, and this receptor alone will combine with the ligand. This is glucocorticoids. So homodimer GR complex will be formed, which then translocates into the nucleus for further cascade of events. Then, after entering into the nucleus, this dimer, homodimer complex, either transactivate or trans-repress the gene by binding to the positive or negative glucocorticoid responsive elements. Either activation co-activator or co-repressor involvement will be there. So stimulation or depression will be there. That is the final response. So alteration in gene transcription leads to change in the desired protein expression. Okay. So again, similar is the case with thyroid hormones receptors, vitamin A and D, peroxisome proliferator activator receptor, otherwise known as PPAR, which acts as a lipid sensor and modulates lipid metabolism within the cell. While steroid receptors are present in the cytosol and translocate after forming dimers, they will get translocated into the nucleus to initiate gene transcription. The other two categories of nuclear receptors, that is like thyroid hormones, vitamin A and D, and PPAR, they are present mainly within the nucleus itself, and they act after forming heterodimers with retinoid X receptor, that is RXR. Okay. Because gene transcription is a relatively slow phenomenon, that is, it takes from minutes to hours because it has to get translocated to the nucleus and then the gene transcription has to result. And a long-lasting process, drugs that target these receptors often require a longer period of time for the onset of action and show longer lasting effects. Long time of onset of action and the latency, that action also lasts for a long period of time. So that's why you can't expect If you give steroids, you can't expect immediate effect. It takes some time. So here you can see this is the heat shock protein. This is receptor combination. As soon as steroid you give, heat shock protein will be liberated, and this receptor will be combining with the drug molecule, DNA binding domain, and transcription activating domain enters into the nucleus for further cascade of events. Same thing. Receptor HSP is liberated. Steroid combines with receptor, dimerization within the nucleus, and co-activators or co-repressors will be stimulated. Transcription modulation will be there, and protein synthesis. Same here. HSP is liberated. Heat shock proteins are liberated. Receptor with steroid. So this gene, glucocorticoid responsive elements will be involved to further result in either increased mRNA synthesis or decreased mRNA synthesis, and for the synthesis of cytokines, enzymes, receptor, etc., whether it is exaggerated or suppressed. What is the clinical application of these receptors? All of these hormones produce their effects after a characteristic lag period of 30 minutes to several hours. So the time required for the synthesis of new proteins. So long time is required. This means that the gene active hormones cannot be expected to alter a pathologic state within minutes. So glucocorticoids will not immediately relieve the symptoms of bronchial asthma. You should keep it in mind. It takes some amount of time for a further cascade of events. Whenever you are giving a particular drug, you should remember how it is going inside the body and what is the mechanism of cascade of events, how much time it is taking, what is the main receptors that are involved. All these should come into picture when you are writing a prescription. Okay. Then the effects of these agents can persist for hours or days after the agonist concentration has been reduced to zero. So long time, long period of action also. The persistence of effect is primarily due to relatively slow turnover of the most enzymes and proteins. So degradation is not there commonly, which can remain active in cells for hours or days after they have been synthesized. Consequently, it means that the beneficial or toxic effects both will be there in the body for a long period of time when you administer the ligands or molecules which act through cytosolic receptors, even after the stoppage of the drug. So, finally, the differences between all the four types of receptors present in cell membrane. This is intracellular, effector molecule, channel or enzyme, and here it is tyrosine kinase, gene transcription, coupling direct, G protein, and direct and via DNA. Examples: nicotinic, muscarinic receptors. Then cytokine receptors, you can remember, steroid receptors. Milliseconds, seconds, hours or days. Same thing here. Sodium channel flow, activation of conductance, G protein involvement, second messenger involvement, cell signaling, phosphorylation of tyrosine molecules, activation of cell signaling, transport to the nucleus, activation of gene transcription and translation as well. Same thing here. So I don't need to explain again. The same thing here. So how it is present in the cell membrane, that is what is depicted here. Okay. Then here, hyperpolarization or depolarization, cellular effects, change in excitability with the involvement of second messengers, protein phosphorylation and cellular effects. Protein phosphorylation, gene transcription, protein synthesis, we have seen that, gene transcription and cellular effects. Then certain enzymes also act as receptors. A large variety of enzymes like both intra and extracellular also serve as potential molecular targets for the drugs. So drugs can either mimic the enzyme substrate after binding with its active site or may bind to its allosteric site to produce the effect. So enzyme stimulation and inhibition we have already studied in biotransformation. So here acetylcholine esterase enzyme degraded by the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Degrades the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So this acetylcholine esterase enzyme inhibitors, they prevent the degradation of acetylcholine. So more amount of acetylcholine is available at the neurotransmitter as a neurotransmitter in the junctions. So thus enhance the cholinergic activity in the cholinergic synapse. So acetylcholine esterase here as an enzyme acts as a receptor for acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. So enzymes acting as receptors. 2 marks question you may get. So we have discussed about targets for drug action, that is receptors, 4 types of receptors, along with that enzymes as receptors. Now we will get into all the other 3. Enzymes as drug targets, second one. The drugs can alter the enzymatic reactions either by increasing or decreasing the rate of such reactions. So this is similar to that of biotransformation. We can just go through with a little bit fast pace. Enzyme stimulation, natural physiological process, adrenaline stimulates adrenaline cyclase. Several enzymes are stimulated through receptors and second messengers. Adrenaline stimulates hepatic glycogen phosphorylase through beta receptors and cyclic AMP, which act as second messengers. So how enzymes are involved here? So you need to just remember the examples. The mechanism, entire thing we have discussed in biotransformation class itself. In enzyme stimulation, affinity for substrate is increased. Apparent enhancement in enzyme activity by drugs is due to enzyme induction. We have studied this. And enzyme activity can also be increased by enzyme induction, causing various drug interactions also. We have studied that, right? In enzyme induction, synthesis of enzyme protein is increased and thus apparent increase in activity. So enzyme inhibition, this can be of 2 types, non-specific and specific. Non-specific means some chemicals like heavy metals, heavy metal salts, strong acids, alkalis, formaldehyde, phenol. They all denature proteins and inhibit all enzymes non-selectively. It is not that this enzyme is specific to that particular molecule. So because of non-specific activity, they don't have that much of clinical implication in therapeutics. Okay. Example is denaturing by alcohol or heavy metals. Then specific enzymatic action, it may be either competitive or non-competitive. So first we'll see the specific enzymatic action, like uric acid synthesis is dependent purely on the enzyme xanthine oxidase. And drugs like allopurinol inhibit xanthine oxidase enzyme. So further the synthesis of uric acid is inhibited, and this principle is utilized in the treatment of secondary hyperuricemia and gout. Then reversible enzyme inhibition. This reversible and irreversible. So reversible means competitive enzyme inhibitors prevent the formation of enzyme substrate complex due to similar shape. So competition, but it is reversible. Usually the drug is structural analog of enzyme and competes for the enzyme. The inhibition depends on the relative concentration of substrate and inhibitor as they compete for active site of the enzyme. So how much quantity that of the molecule is released, so that is going to compete with the other molecule. So because of which it is temporary or equilibrium type or surmountable. And drug antagonism anyway we'll be discussing in the other topic by some other faculty. Then example is physostigmine competes with acetylcholine for cholinesterase. Same molecules, combine similar kind of action, competing with same enzyme, that is cholinesterase. Then irreversible. A non-equilibrium type of enzyme inhibition can also occur with drugs which react with same catalytic site of the enzyme, but either form strong covalent bonds, because of which irreversible we have discussed in that session, or have such high affinity for the enzyme that the normal substrate is not able to displace. High affinity we have discussed in the earlier session, so that the substrate molecule is not able to get displaced. So because of which you will see the irreversible enzyme inhibition. Or else another reason is strong covalent bond formation. Example is organophosphates react covalently with the stereotic site of enzyme cholinesterase. The non-competitive inhibition, here the inhibitors bind to allosteric site, some other site other than the active site of the enzyme, and distort the structure of the enzyme, making them unable to catalyze a reaction. That's how the inhibition happens. So here, because it is allosteric site, so the structure of the drug and substrate need not be the same. But they prevent the formation of enzyme product because of the allosteric contact. So their action is not affected by substrate concentration. And here the inhibition is usually irreversible, and activity returns only when fresh enzymes are synthesized. Example, that is like the non-competitive inhibition may be reversible also in certain cases. In exceptional cases, that is carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, acetazolamide. So receptors are over, enzymes are over. Now we'll come to transport molecules or carrier molecules. Here the carrier molecules are usually required for the transport of ions and small organic molecules across the cell membrane because they are lipid insoluble or polar. So they take the help of transport molecules or carrier molecules and then get into the cell membrane. Example, transport of either glucose or amino acid or sodium or calcium ions, either in or out. These carrier proteins provide a recognition site. So that protein, carrier molecule, transporter protein will be having the receptor site to which the substrate will go and combine. And these specific sites are affected by drugs also. Example, interaction with the noradrenaline, 5-hydroxytryptamine and dopamine transporter. Various transport processes such as sodium potassium ATPase pump, calcium channels, potassium channels, sodium calcium exchange regulate the ionic concentrations of the cells and control the cell functions. So the drugs may bind to the proteins observing these transport processes and alter the activity of channels, either enhancing or inhibiting. So here, digitalis example, digitalis binds to and inhibits sodium potassium ATPase, and another example is omeprazole binds to and inhibits proton pump, that is hydrogen potassium pump. Other proteins which are involved here are immunophilin and tubulin. Immunophilin has enzymatic activity and catalyzes the cis-trans isomerization of proline residue in proteins. And this isomerization is responsible for the correct folding of proteins expressed because of its signal cascade of events result. But when we use the cyclosporin drug molecule, it combines with immunophilin and prevents the molecule immunophilin, so thus producing the immunosuppressant effect. Similar is the case with colchicine, which combines with tubulin and then interacts with it and produces anti-inflammatory action in the management of acute gouty arthritis. So we have finished receptors, enzymes, transporters, and the last one is ion channels. These are the targets of drug action. Ion channels, this we have already discussed along with inotropic receptors. So just we'll go through it. Voltage gated ion channels are ion channels that are gated only by voltage. So whenever there is voltage difference extracellularly and intracellularly comparison, then the ion channels open. So some ions move inside, some ions move outside. So examples, sodium channels, potassium channels, calcium channels, and sodium channel blockade by local anesthetics. That is a wonderful example here. We can say various types of channels. So how the voltage gated ion channels act, we have discussed already. Same thing. Difference. This is voltage difference. And here only ligand binding that results in opening of the channel. That is the difference between voltage gated and ligand gated. Last, so we have discussed the receptor mediated mechanisms and the targets of drug action. So now the last part of the session, that is the non-receptor mediated mechanisms. So it is not that all the drugs, all the molecules that enter into the body act through only receptors. So we have various types. That is one by chemical action, chelation. Chelating agents trap the heavy metals like lead, mercury, copper, iron, etc. in their ring structure and form non-toxic water-soluble complexes which are finally excreted. So these are like iron poisoning, mercury poisoning, copper poisoning. So these are like heavy metals. So they will be combining with chelating agents which we administer exogenously, and they will form non-toxic water-soluble molecules which can be excreted out. So there is no receptor involvement here. Example, EDTA chelates calcium, desferoxamine chelates iron. All these drugs are also used to treat heavy metal poisoning. That is extracellular site of action, which we discussed in the first few slides of the earlier session. The neutralization, antacids act by neutralizing gastric hyperacidity. Then ion exchange, anion exchange resin like cholestyramine exchanges chloride ions from the bile salts and the resultant complex is not absorbed and is excreted out. Ion exchange resin. So it is used in the management of hypercholesterolemia. Then osmosis, because of the osmotic effect, magnesium sulfate acts as a purgative. So the fluid is retained in the lumen of the intestine and the total fluid bulk of feces is increased, facilitating purgation. Adsorption, it is also helpful in the management of poisoning. So activated charcoal is used in the management of poison, which absorbs the poisons, so that it will get excreted. Adsorption, absorption, there is difference. Adsorption means just that molecule goes and combines with it. There is no effect of that molecule. It just combines with that molecule and takes away that molecule out of the body. That is adsorption. Absorption means getting into the circulation. Okay. Then protectives, various dusting powders to provide local effects. Then soothing or demulcents. So the demulcents means they provide smooth coating over the inflamed mucosal membranes. So they protect the membrane like that. Example is syrup Vasaka in cough linctus used as pharyngeal demulcent. So it soothes the pharyngeal inflammation. So that is used in the management of cough. Astringents, this is also we have discussed in the earlier session. They precipitate and denature the mucosal proteins and thus protect the mucosa by firming up the mucosal surface. Example, tannic acid in gum paints. Alcohol, when applied locally on skin, causes hardening of the skin, which is used in the treatment of bed sores in unconscious patients because of the precipitating of proteins and then hardening the skin. Saturation in biophase. General anesthetics saturate the cellular sites called biophase of the CNS. They get saturated within the CNS, packed up in between the membrane lipids and thus hinder some metabolic functions or reset the membrane organization. Then counterfeit mechanism. Bacteria synthesize their own folic acid from PABA for their growth and development. It is very, very important 2 marks question. Counterfeit mechanism of drug action. And sometimes you may get even short question also. Sulfur drugs resemble PABA. What happens? Bacteria synthesize folic acid from PABA. And sulfur drugs in structure, they resemble PABA. So when we give sulfur drugs, so bacteria think that PABA is sulfur drugs only. They take up sulfur drugs and try to synthesize the folic acid, which is not normal because that folic acid contains a sulfur drug moiety in the place of PABA. So it becomes that folic acid becomes non-functional to the bacteria. So because there is no folic acid, the bacteria start collapsing because there is no growth and development. The bacteria, uh, it becomes standstill. There is no growth and development and multiplication. It's like a bacteriostatic activation action. Then by virtue of being protoplasmic poisons, examples like germicides and antiseptics like phenol and formaldehyde, they act as protoplasmic poisons, causing death of bacteria. And then through formation of antibodies, these are all belonging to, they all belong to non-receptor mediated actions. Vaccines against smallpox, cholera providing active immunity, and then anti-sera against tetanus and diphtheria providing passive immunity. Then through placebo action, so it is a pharmacodynamically inert substance. It does not have any action, pharmacological action. But when given to a patient in particular dosage form, it resembles the actual medicament in size, shape, color, smell, weight. So the patient feels that I have taken a drug and it is going to act in my body, I'm going to get relief. That is the psychological effect. So the examples are we use starch and lactose molecules in place of drug molecules. They are used as placebos in solid dosage forms. Placebo itself is a very important question for postgraduate students, and even UGs also may get it. Then by targeting specific genetic changes, here inhibitors of specific tyrosine kinase that blocks the activity of oncogenic kinases can be one action, and delivering a gene to cancer cells rendering them sensitive to drugs. Here drugs are used and here gene is used. Inhibitors of specific tyrosine kinase so that they'll block the oncogenic kinases. Here gene is released into the body to the cancer cells, rendering them sensitive to the chemotherapeutic drugs. So that is all about signal transduction and targets of drug action. Hope you have the clarity. If you can't understand, go through it again at least once or twice. I suggest you to go through Sharma book for this particular topic, and the matter or information that I have given in these 2 sessions, it is not completely present in the Sharma book. So if you want to go through it, you can get, if you go through it and get the knowledge, you can get very good marks from it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Go through both the sessions, and then if you have any queries, you can clarify with me. Thank you.